Hey everyone, it's Lorraine from Sowtheland, and today I'm going to be showing you what we do in our homestead during the week for handicraft. Penelope and I often sit together and embroider, especially when the weather looks like this outside and it's rainy and it's really too cold to kind of get out. So we'll sit by our wood stove and we will embroider together. Penelope and I have been working on an embroidery sampler, and I'll show you what that looks like and the tools you'll need and some stitches. And I'm hoping that we can continue the series and we will learn a new stitch maybe every week, and we can do that together. All of the materials that I'm going to talk about today are going to be listed below. You can purchase them on Amazon. The first thing you're going to need for hand embroidery is an embroidery hoop. This one is a wooden one. There are plastic ones that are out there, and those are great too. Any size is great. This one just happens to be about the size of my hand. The next thing you're going to need is some embroidery floss. You can choose from a huge variety of colors. You can get a pack of colors. However, when you're teaching children, or if this is your first time for yourself embroidering, I don't recommend the white or the black. It's hard to see some of the little fine details in such a dark color or something that can be almost the same color as your fabric. So I recommend the colored floss. And the next thing you're going to need is an embroidery needle. Now this is different than a sewing needle. The embroidery needle has a larger eye than a sewing needle, and it is typically thicker and longer. And there are different sizes of embroidery needles. What I recommend for the children are the largest size that you can find. You want to stay away from tapestry needles, but you can find embroidery needles with very large eyes, and that is helpful for the children to learn to thread the needle, especially when we're going to be using all 6 strands of the embroidery floss. So embroidery needles with a very large eye, that's what you'll need. Now you will need a piece of fabric. What I recommend is some muslin fabric, but if you don't want to go out and purchase fabric, you are certainly welcome to use any scrap fabric that you have lying around the house. Maybe an old skirt or pillowcase is actually a really good idea. You can cut that up. But what I don't recommend is a jersey or a knit type fabric. If you are unfamiliar with the difference between a knit or a woven fabric, think of it, a knit fabric is like a t-shirt and it's knitted together. And that is not something you want for beginner hand embroidery. You'll want to stick with a woven fabric. So this is muslin, and like I said, you can cut up an old pillowcase or an old bed sheet, and that will work just fine as well. I've cut my fabric into this narrow strip here. You just want to make sure that it's the same width as your embroidery hoop that you're working with, because some embroider hoops are actually pretty large, so you just want to make sure that it's the same size, if not a little bit larger. You definitely don't want something that is going to leave a gap here. The next thing you're going to need are a pair of scissors. I happen to have these embroidery snippers, which I really like, because when you're embroidering you can just snip your fabric, snip your thread really quickly, and they work just fine. But if you have little children's scissors, that's great too, or even just any household scissors, but you do need a pair of scissors to cut your thread. This is one of the samplers that we're working with in our homeschool, and we're labeling each of the stitch that we're learning, and we're just going to keep on adding to it, and hopefully we will have more pages, fabric pages, that look just like this, and we can sew them together like in a little book, or we can frame them for display. The first thing you'll want to do with your fabric as soon as you cut it down to size is draw very lightly with some pencil some straight lines and also with a ruler, draw some straight lines, and this will also help your students or yourself to stay in a straight line when you're hand embroidering. So I did some lines here on this fabric, you can see, very lightly. The first stitch that we are going to learn today together is the running stitch, and it is a very easy stitch. But before we actually get into the stitches, and this is what I share with Penelope and her little homeschool friends, we have to talk about, there are certain rules for hand embroidery. There are certain things that we have to learn first before we actually get into our first stitch of hand embroidery. One of the first rules that I share with Penelope or any other first time hand embroiderers is that you always want to park your needle. You only get one needle, and if you lose it, you have to find it. So I always teach Penelope that when you are stopping, always park your needle. A good way to keep you from losing your needle is to always park it, because we're always pausing, whether it's, you know, having a conversation, or maybe your floss slips out of the eye of your needle and you need to pick it up or whatever. It's good to park your needle. So that's rule number one, is always park your needle. Let's go over together how to use your embroidery hoop. Your embroidery hoop will come with a screw on the top, and this is to adjust the outer hoop. So if you see here, there are two pieces to your embroidery hoop. One is the bottom piece, and this one is the top piece, and the top piece is adjustable to fit over the bottom piece and your fabric. You'll want to take your fabric and place it over your bottom hoop, and then fit your top hoop right on top of it. Press it down and screw it tighter. And you will also want to make sure that it's pretty tight so the fabric is held taut and it's not baggy and loose. You'll want to cut yourself a piece of floss about an arm length away. You don't want to cut it too short, but you don't want it also too long. So from fingertip to elbow on an adult, or an arm length away for a child is sufficient. You'll want to make sure that the very tip of your floss is not hairy. If it is, it's hard to get through the eye of the needle. So you want to give it a haircut. And then next, you just wet the tip of it and flatten it out with your fingers. And thread it just like that. And slip it through the eye of the needle. And leave yourself a little tail. You're going to park your needle again and tie yourself a little knot at the end. Now, when you hold your needle, you'll always want to pinch it here at the eye. So that way the tail doesn't slip through, and then you'll have to rethread your needle. And now we're ready to embroider our very first stitch. Embroidery is fun, and there's all these rules, but these rules will make it fun. Like, I mean, I'm not telling you all these rules so that way I don't take all the fun out of it. I'm telling you these rules so that way it will be fun, because if you don't, trust me, threading your needle is not that fun. And when you have tangles and knots and you're drowning and you need help, that's not fun. So, but if you follow the rules, it will be fun for you. One more thing that I want to go over is the way that you will hold your embroider hoop while you're embroidering. So you want to hold your hoop. This is the face of your work. You'll always hold it this way. When you embroider, you really don't embroider on the back. You always hold it this way, and you always want to start your embroidery coming from the back. You can find where you want to start by just poking and seeing where it's at. You'll get to be really good at figuring out where your needle needs to go. But you'll always want to hold it with your work side face up towards you. There are two ways to do the running stitch. The first method I'm going to show you is really simple. You start here from the back of your hoop and you come straight up. and just pull it all the way gently until you've reached your knot. Next, you'll come in at 1 stitch length away. Pull your floss all the way down. The key here is consistency. You'll want to make sure your stitch lengths are the same and consistently the same size, or else it won't look as pretty. Now, there is another way to do the running stitch, and I'll show you this way. You'll want to come in from underneath, and then once you're on top, your thread is coming out from the top, you'll put in your needle 1 stitch length away, and then poke through and then pull it out. And then here's where you're going to flip over your hoop and tie yourself a knot. Take your snippers, park your needle, and you have just completed the running stitch. And that's all we have time for today, but I hope you enjoyed the beginning of this series of hand embroidery, and we hope to continue on next week with a new stitch, and I hope you'll join me then. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.